started. All right. You guys ever say something and then immediately regret it? Like maybe you were telling your mom that you cleaned your room and you know you didn't. Or you said, just hit me back, right? You hit your brother. This was one of my favorite ones. Me and my brother are about a year old, first of all. And as any of you who have raised multiple boys might know, they tend to punch each other a lot. My brother and I are no exception. But I remember when I was about 10, so he would have been about 9, I accidentally hit him really hard to the point where he was crying. And he's my little brother, so my mom comes running to help him out. And while she's on her way, I said, Dalton, just hit me back. Just hit me back, just as hard. It'll be fine, right? If you hit me just as hard, we'll both be in pain. It's even. It doesn't work that way, as most of you might assume. He hit me way harder than I hit him, and then my mom came to help me. But that was one of the things that I remember very distinctively when I was young. I said, and I immediately regretted it. I want to tell you guys a story. So I used to work at Walmart when I was at college, but my favorite part of doing so was for a year I worked in security. And so I was a cart pusher for a little bit, I was a cashier for a little bit, and I don't have near as many fun stories about those. But working in security, you get to meet some interesting people. I'm sure you guys walk around Walmart and you can tell there's interesting people. My favorite was this lady whose name I can't remember, but I'm going to call her Jane for the sake of argument. I know that's not her name, but we're going to pretend it is. So I'm working in security, and at this point, there's my boss, me, and one other person working. And this other person is actually in training, so she has no idea what she's doing. Her name is Aaliyah. My boss is Paul. And I am walking out of our security office, and I'm going to, start looking around, and the person at self-checkout calls me and says, hey, listen, you're going to want to come over here. Now, most of you guys probably assume self-checkout is probably one of the best places for the security people to hang out around, and it's true, it is. But I come around and I said, hey, what's up? And this self-checkout person says, well, this person over here, and she points to Jane, she says, she missed like 2 or 3 things. I'm sure it's nothing, but you may just want to watch. And I said, okay, that's fine. And I'm fairly new at this. I'm like 2 months into this job. And a lot of you guys might know 2 months into a job, you don't really know what you're doing yet. So I'm sitting here and I'm watching, and all I'm looking for is stuff not getting scanned. And she's got 2 full carts of stuff, first of all. So I assumed a few things wouldn't get scanned. But she comes up, right, and she scans one, and there's a second thing on top. And I go, okay, that's one. She puts them both in the cart. The next one, she takes it, and it's one of those packages of ground beef from not really the deli, but like the refrigerated area, and it's got the barcode on front that does absolutely nothing for you, and the barcode on the back that you actually have to scan. And she scans the front one and throws it in. And I go, okay, there's 2. And then the third one, I watched her just give to her little boy that was standing there without scanning it, and he throws it in the cart. And I was like, okay, that's 3. So the rule at my store was if you miss 3, you make the stop. You stop them at the doors. You tell them they got to come back inside. Normal stuff. It's really not that normal. But I see it, and I go, okay. And I call Paul, and I say, hey, I'm going to make a stop. I need you to go to the doors. And then I call Aaliyah, because she, and being in training, has to observe so many, right? And so I say, hey, Aaliyah, you're going to want to come out here and like watch this person for a little bit, and then we'll stop him at the door. So as I'm doing all of this, right, I come over here and I'm watching, and she can see me watching her. She's got 2 carts full of stuff. She's been in the self-checkouts for like an hour. She notices when people aren't moving, right? And so she just keeps going, and she just keeps going. And then she gets ready to leave. She turns her cart. She starts pushing it. And we stop her at the door. We bring her back into the office, and she says, I might have missed a few things, but that's it. Like, look at all of this. There's no way I didn't miss a few things. And I go, okay, maybe that's what happened. I like to err on the side of believing people this job kind of like beat that out of me. So I said, okay, well maybe you did, but we just have to check. We take both carts of her stuff and we have to take it up to the service desk, and they make this big long list of everything that's in the cart, and then they compare that to the receipt that she had, right? Now, 2 carts worth of stuff means it's going to take like 30 minutes to do all of this. So my boss takes that. I am sitting in the office, and we have this little like system that everyone goes in who's ever shoplifted. So if you've ever shoplifted before, I know you. But we have this little system that I'm putting her information into, and this woman was just not working with me. I don't know what it was. I do know what it was. She didn't want to get arrested. But so she's sitting here, and first she starts doing all of these ridiculous things. She's taking anxiety pills, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense, but you can't really do that in case that's like, drugs. And then I said, you can't do that, and she stops. And then she decided the best thing to do to relieve her stress, since she can't take her anxiety drugs, is to start smoking in the office. So she just pulled out her cigarette and lit it, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And so I had to take her cigarette, and I threw it in Aaliyah's Dr. Pepper, and she said, you owe me one. And I said, yeah, I know, it's $1.79. So I take care of all of this, right? And she's sitting here just freaking out. She won't give me her ID, which tells me she probably did this before. But I said, listen, if you can't give me your ID, I have to call the police. And she goes, okay, here you go. So that's how I knew she mostly just didn't want to get arrested. But she starts working with me a little bit, and I'm still believing. I said, okay, maybe she's right. Maybe she did just miss a few things, right? It's 2 full carts, and not just like full up to like the top, like it's way up here. It's as high as it can be. It's 2 mountains, right? And my boss calls me from wherever he's doing all of his stuff at, because he's taking the receipt and everything. And he says, call the police. And I said, okay. And I called the police. They come. And eventually, what ends up happening is my boss walks in, and my boss was a really sarcastic guy. I love Paul. But he was hilarious to work with, and I would have hated having worked not with him, right? If he was just some dude at the store, I would have hated him. But he comes in and he says, well, Jane, would you like to see what your final total was? And she says, absolutely, because I paid like $500 for this. There's no way that I missed that much. And he pulls out the receipt that she had, and he says, you're right, you paid for about 500 some odd dollars. And he says, and this is the receipt of how much stuff was actually in the cart. And it neared 900. And I said, oh man. Like I said, this job beat the will to err on the side of the person telling me stuff, right? It just beat out of me the whole give them the benefit of the doubt. Because most of the time people use it and abuse it. But Jane here, right? She immediately regretted lying to me because I became very mean at that point. So she understands this idea of regretting what you say, right? You guys might have similar stories. One of my favorite ones, my freshman year at Central, I was driving back from Mason City, and I got stopped in between Kirksville and Macon, Missouri. And Maddie and I have decided that in Macon County, Missouri, you do not speed. It's the rule. They will stop you for going 5 over. They'll stop you for going 1 over. They just need the income. So this is how we figured this out. I was driving back. It's about 11 o'clock at night, and we have to be in the dorms by midnight. Kirksville is an hour from Moberly, so I've got to be making perfect time to get there on time, right? So I'm speeding a little, right? I think the ticket said 13 miles per hour over. And so as I'm driving through, this cop stops me, and this is the first time I've ever been pulled over, so I'm sure you could imagine 18-year-old Martin freaking out, right? And I'm sitting here, and I'm going, okay, what am I going to tell this guy? Because I know why I'm getting pulled over. I'm not, I can lie about it, but he knows why he's pulling me over. He says, like every cop does when they pull you over, you know why I pulled you over? No. Why? And he goes, you were speeding. And I said, oh, but it was like 3 miles per hour over. And he goes, no, it wasn't. I got my ticket and I paid it, of course, but there was no reason for me to lie. But I immediately regretted it because he didn't give me the benefit of the doubt, right? You guys might have similar stories, but I want to tell you guys another one. This one's about an entire nation, the nation of Israel. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn to Joshua chapter 24. If you guys have your Bibles, you can open that up. We're going to be in verses 14 through 28. If you have your phone, it's way easier to find because you just scroll and hit Joshua, and then you scroll and hit 24. And I'm going to read it here in a little bit, but I want to give you guys some background information. So, first of all, I love the Old Testament because it's so much fun. You just don't see the same amount of gruesome murders in the New Testament, you know? But in the Old Testament, before Jesus comes, right, the nation of Israel is this chosen people, and they were told that they were supposed to represent God in the world. That was basically what they got told. Abraham starts out. Abraham's this like 90-year-old man who had a child with his 80-year-old wife, and I guess by the time they had the kid, he was 100 and she was 90. But either way, still the same thing. Super old, shouldn't have had kids. They were barren from the entire time that they were there, and all of a sudden, this kid shows up, right? And they named him Isaac, which, this is my favorite thing, and it doesn't always get told when you tell kids these stories. Isaac means to laugh at someone, because Sarah laughed at God when he said that she was going to have a baby. And I just think God has a real sense of humor for that one. But then all of this stuff happens, and we go down through the line of Israel, and Isaac has kids, 2 kids, Jacob and Esau. And Jacob and Esau are like me and my brother in the story that I told you, where we like to hit each other a lot. Jacob and Esau were not friendly brothers. They were mean brothers. But they're twins, and Isaac gives this blessing to Jacob over Esau. And then they hated each other the rest of their lives, which, I mean, I would too. But, so then Jacob has 12 kids that become the 12 tribes of Israel. And one of my favorite stories is watching Jacob wrestle with God for 24 hours. And then God's just like, okay, I'm done with this. And he taps him on the hip and shatters it, right? Some of you guys know what that feels like. I haven't felt that yet, and I hope never to. But all of a sudden his hip shattered and he couldn't get up, and I think it's hilarious. But so then all of this stuff happens. The 12 tribes of Israel are all in Egypt. They get enslaved. Continue, right? Moses shows up. Moses leads them through big groups of water, right? Comes up like a wall, and then he like drowns a bunch of Egyptians, which we tend to glass over, but that's really cool. And then they spend 40 years in the wilderness, and then what happens? Then they get to go to the promised land, right? No, they're all dead. That's why they had to wait. Their children got to go in, they didn't, and when Moses dies, he gets to appoint a successor. And he says, I like this guy Joshua. He's pretty cool. And so Joshua picks up right after Moses dies, and they get told that their entire job in this time period, throughout the rest of this book, is to drive out all of the people that lived in the promised land. So there were like 12-ish people groups that lived in there, and they got to just like chase them out or like kill them and stuff, which was kind of wild. Like I said, the Old Testament's way more fun to read. But that's where this ends up coming to. So we're at the end of the book of Joshua, and Joshua is about to give his final speech. And this is what he says. Let me scroll up here to verse 14. I'm going to read the New International Version, so if you have something different, that's why. It says, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Then the people answered, "Far be it from us to forsake the Lord to serve other gods. It was the Lord our God himself who brought us and our parents up out of Egypt from the land of slavery and performed those great signs before our eyes. He protected us on our entire journey and among the nations through which we traveled. And the Lord drove out before us all the nations, including the Amorites who lived in the land. We too will serve the Lord because he is our God." And then there's like a whole bunch of other stuff, right? I'm going to get there, but give me just a sec. So I want to start out and explain what's going on. Like I said, this is Joshua's final speech, right? And he says, "Okay, I'm about to kick the bucket. Here's what's going to happen." He says, "You guys need to decide for yourselves what's going to happen. First," he says, "decide if you're going to follow the Lord." And the Israelites responded and they went, "Of course we'll follow the Lord." And for those of you that are familiar with your Old Testament, they don't. But that's one of those things where they really quickly regretted it. But he says, "You need to decide if you're going to serve the Lord." And they go, "Of course we will. Look at all of these things that he's done." Joshua actually, before this, reminds them of everything that I just told you. Everything about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses and Joshua, all of this that's happened before him. He says, remember all of this, because, first of all, these are some pretty crazy stories. Had I seen somebody with the power or with God behind them push back water so that I could walk through an entire sea on dry land, I don't think that I'd have much problems believing. I don't know about you guys, but that's one of those things that you see once and you know, right? And there's stories about these all over the place. Birds dropping bread from the air to provide for the Israelites while they're in the desert. That's wicked. They call it manna, which literally means, what is this? They didn't know what to call it. But then you see all of these stories, right? And especially Jericho, a story we're fairly familiar with, right? Joshua leads the Israelites out to the city of Jericho, and it's this huge walled city, and they walk around it one time a day for 6 days, and on the seventh day, they walk around 7 times and blow a trumpet, and then the wall falls over. What the heck? And then they just, killed everyone, which, again, wild. I love the Old Testament. It's so much fun. But then you see they just keep driving people out of the land because God's on their side. And Joshua says, "Okay, I'm not here to hold your hands anymore." He says, "I got to let you guys go because, again, I'm about to die." And he knows it. He's not sugarcoating it. He says, "You guys need to figure out what you're going to do from here forward because I cannot make you do anything." He says, "You guys need to decide for yourselves if you're going to follow the Lord." And then that verse that's on 50% of Christians' walls that says, "But for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." And then Joshua says that. He says, "You guys get to make your decision. I've made mine." He says, "Me and my household, me and my family, I'm going to teach them, and we are going to serve the Lord the rest of our lives." And it's awesome, right? Because Joshua gets this short rest of his life, so he doesn't have to do a whole lot. I thought you guys would laugh at more death jokes, but that's okay. So Joshua teaches his kids how to follow God, and Joshua's kids supposedly continue to do so. And that's part of the problem through the rest of the Old Testament, is every once in a while you get this great person who does all of these amazing things, and you can see God in their lives, and then that person dies, and then the Israelites are like, "Oh, now what?" That's the entire cycle of the book of Judges, which happens after Joshua. They get this amazing person to show them how to serve God, that shows them how to drive the people out, and then they die, and it says, and then they followed God for 10 more years, and then they stopped, and God had to send another judge. And that's the entire cycle of the book of Judges. But as you go through this, right, Joshua says, serve the Lord in sincerity and truth. And that's how he starts this out. He says, when you do something for God, when you serve him, right, you do it for him. I'm super guilty of this. Every once in a while, not every once in a while, but it was a lot when I was younger. When I do something for the church, for other Christians, for anybody, right? I don't really do it for God, but I do it for that good feeling in my stomach, right? Where you can walk away and you go, I'm so good. I gave that dude like $20. Or I helped this guy fill his tank of his car when it's like $5 a gallon. I'm so great. What a good Jesus follower. I'm sure everyone's guilty of it. We've all done it at some point. And that's how we first learn how to do something. That's first how we learn to do good, right? Because it rewards us. But Joshua says at some point you have to stop. And you start doing it not for the good feelings, not for the rewards, but for God himself. Right? He asks them to check their intentions. Right? I like to think of this way. You guys remember when you were kids and you pushed a kid on the playground and your teacher made you go apologize to him? Maybe you guys weren't as mean as kids as I was, but I remember doing that, and I remember what that apology looked like. I remember I walked up to the kid and I said, I'm sorry. Right? You guys probably did the same thing with kids, right? I can almost guarantee that we'll do the same thing with Sailor, but you teach kids to say sorry whether they mean it or not. It's not sincere, and that's the way Joshua describes the faith that he wants the Israelites to have, is sincere. It's not this, I like Jesus, he's cool. It's over here serving him, doing what he wants because you love him, right? And so that's one of these first commands that he says. He talks about making sure that you're following with a sincere and truth in his heart, or in your heart, right? And the second command is to remove the gods that they were serving, right? Remove the gods that you were serving. Now, this is a little more difficult for us to understand because we don't always build statues for the things that we dedicate our lives to, right? I don't, at least, but maybe some of you guys do. Those are usually called idols, and for those of you that have read the book Gods at War by Kyle Idleman or done the series, you'll notice that what he ascribes sin to is this misdirection of priorities. You sin because you put something higher than God. And this is kind of one of those areas that I could believe him. I don't necessarily buy it all the time, but it's this idea that whatever you put at the top of your priority list, that's what you're going to do, right? And so I remember when I was younger, for those of you that maybe didn't grow up in the same generation as me, which I think most of you didn't, I loved playing video games when I was a kid. I brought my little Game Boy with me all the time. I played my GameCube the whole time I was at home. And now I have a Nintendo Switch at home that I play with everything. So, but I remember this guy at our church. His name is Bob. I love Bob. Now that I'm older and I know him better, I love the guy. But when I was a kid, and he would tell my mom, he would tell me, he would tell everyone around us, video games are from Satan. And I was like, what the heck, Bob? Where'd you get that from? Now I understand what he's talking about is this desire to play games, to do these things that you enjoy before serving God, right? It's the priority list. It's not the idea in itself. But I didn't see that at the time. Joshua's talking about this here. He says, go, take the gods that you were serving. Take the gods that you served in Egypt, way before we were serving Yahweh, way before all of this, right? Take what you have of that and destroy it. He says, don't let it in your life anymore. And Jesus has a similar message. I don't know if you guys remember it or not. On the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus goes a little more extreme than Joshua does here. But Jesus says that if your right hand causes you to sin, what do? You chop it off and you throw it in fire. He says, get rid of it. If something is causing you to sin, cut it out of your life, get rid of it. It's the same idea that Joshua is giving here. right? And as we continue, right, the rest of this conversation that Joshua is having with the Israelites actually goes like this. Well, you guys have said that you're going to serve the Lord. Are you sure about that? And they go, yes, we're sure, right? And then Joshua goes, well, you guys are going to be witnesses against yourself. Okay, well, that's kind of confusing. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense unless you're familiar with court. You guys ever been to court? No. Me neither. I've never been to court. Cross my fingers and hope not to die. Seen it in movies. That's exactly right. Throughout the Bible, there's this idea of a courtroom scene, right? And this is the best way to describe what it means to be a witness against something. When let's say you vandalized a wall. Some of you guys were not as crazy as I was when I was a kid. I drew on walls all the time. But when you vandalize a wall or public property, right, you go to court because they're going to figure out how much they're going to fine you for. So what's the absolute last thing that you want if you're going to court for vandalism? The last thing you want is someone who saw you do it, right? Someone who is going to testify, someone who witnessed it, right? They said, I was there, I was down the street, and I saw that person right there. I'm pointing at Ethan because I know he did it. I saw that person right there. They were painting on the wall. They did all this graffiti, right? And if they can tell you exactly what you did, you're in big trouble. I had to testify one time in court. The guy ended up backing out. I was super glad about it. But this guy, again, this is another story about me being in security, because they're the best stories. So this guy walks into my store at 3:30 in the morning. People are dedicated when they decided they're going to shoplift. I tell people the most creative people I have ever met are thieves. This guy walks in the store at 3:30 in the morning because he knows nothing's going on. No one cares at 3:30 in the morning, right? The overnight people, they don't care. They just want to get their stuff done. So this guy walks in, and he's pushing his cart, and I have video of him for 3 hours just picking up random stuff in the store and throwing it in his cart. And then I finally got to where he picked up a tent, he picked up an air mattress, and a couple of other things, right? He got the stuff that he really needed. So he throws it in the cart, and it's on top, and he decided, okay, I'm ready. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever seen somebody push a cart out of the doors at Walmart or anything, and they're definitely stealing, right? I don't know if you've seen it. I've seen it way too many times. But this guy decided he was going to be smart. He parked his door next to a fire exit. So he pushed it out the fire exit so there was no one around. And he loads the stuff he needs in his cart, and he drives off. And remember, Walmart has cameras everywhere. I mean everywhere. Anywhere except the bathrooms, there's cameras. It's crazy. And so I have video of him doing this for 3 hours. And then I have video of him going out the fire door and loading the stuff in the car and driving off. I even have a video where you can see the license plate of the car. So I take all of this stuff, right, and I take it to the police station, and I hand it to this officer, and every time that they ask me to do something, I'm like, okay. And so he asked me to go through what I saw, and I was like, okay, it's all written down in there, but I'll go through it. And I explained what goes on, and I took a picture of his face when he walked in the store, because there's cameras for that too. And he looks at the picture, and he goes, no way. And I was like, what? And he goes, that's my brother-in-law. Oof. I imagine that is not a fun family reunion. A couple months later, I get a call that they found the car. The car was also stolen, by the way. He stole it from St. Louis and drove it to Moberly, Missouri, which that's like a 3-hour drive. I don't know why he went all the way up there. But then he loaded it up with all this stuff, his tent, his air mattress, and then he left. He went and used it for a couple days, returned the car with the tent and the air mattress in it so that he couldn't be found with it, right? And I get a call that it's all there. I come and get it. I didn't go to St. Louis. They brought it to Moberly. And then I take it into the store, I put in the document stuff. But about 3-ish months later, which I am no longer in security at this point, I had a county sheriff walk up to me and say, "Hey, are you Martin Hinten?" And I go, "Yeah, why?" And he goes, "You can have fun in court." It was not a fun day. I had to clock into work, drive all the way over there, which the courthouse was like 20 miles away. So I drove out to the courthouse, and I go and I'm waiting for this number to get called, and the cop that took the case, he comes in, and he's a friend of mine, and he sits next to me, and we're just kind of like hanging out. And then he says, "Okay, listen, this is the way this works, because I've never been in court before. He has. He says, you just listen for this number, and if they skip over it, it means that they took a plea deal." And I said, "Okay, cool. I've been sitting here for 30 minutes, right?" And then they called the next number. It's the number past what I needed, and it wasted all of my time. But I was ready at that point to be a witness, right? I was ready to tell people, this is what I saw, this is the guy I saw, and this is the huge list of stuff that he stole, which was over $1,000, by the way. And I was just like, okay, it wasted my day, but I was ready to testify, right? And that's this idea of being a witness against someone. You're ready to testify against them. You can say, "No, you said this." When you are 10 years later and your buddy who you watched promise to serve God says, "I think I'm done," you can say, "You said so." It's this idea, right? That you have somebody who can correct you, who can encourage you to continue on that path, right? It's this idea that you get to help push somebody closer to God. And it is a push sometimes. I mean, it's a shove. They think they're going to fall over. But that's this idea from this passage. And part of the reason I love this is because we put it up in our houses and we don't fully understand what's going on. We don't understand that Joshua is saying, get rid of your idols. We don't understand that he's saying, listen, today you dedicate yourself to this. And we just put it up in our houses. I love it. And I love having that conversation with people. My mom was one of those people. She had it up on her wall, and I got to explain after a year at Bible college, because after a year at Bible college, you know everything. I got to explain to my mom that's not the context. The context is Joshua saying, I'm dedicating today and the rest of my life to serving God, and my family will do so with me. And we're going to get rid of the things that we did before. We're going to cut the sick parts of our lives out. And there's ways you can do that. There's ways that we do that as a church, right? One of those is these little cups. So if you haven't grabbed one of these yet, you can go ahead and grab one. I'm assuming most of you already have them because no one's moving yet. But this is one of the ways that we remind ourselves of the promises we make, that we can testify for ourselves, that we can testify for our neighbors, for our friends, that we've dedicated our lives to serving God, and we do so by remembering Him. And so when we take the blood and the bread, or the grape juice and the bread, whatever you want to call it, when we take these things, we remind ourselves and we remind our neighbors that we've made this promise, and we can encourage each other in these. And it doesn't have to happen here either. It can be at home with your kids or grandkids, reminding them. It can be when you're out at dinner, the first bite of your spaghetti and sip of your soda, whatever you want. The importance isn't what's in here. The importance is what we do with it, right? And so I want to go ahead and pray as we take the opportunity to reflect on this promise that we make today.